The evening had started like any other in his quiet routine. He had finished his shift at the workshop, wiped the dust from his hands, and checked his phone for messages from home. His daughter had sent him a picture of the dinner she had cooked by herself, proudly showing burnt rice and unevenly cut vegetables. He smiled at it for minutes, feeling that warm ache that only a parent knows, the kind that reminds them why they keep going even when they are tired to their bones. The bus ride home was slow, the kind where every streetlight felt like a pause. He leaned his head against the window, letting the cool glass calm his thoughts. Life had not been easy, but it had become peaceful in its own way. He had learned to wake up early, hack lunch for two, braid small hair with trembling fingers, and laugh at moments where he once would have broken. He never told anyone how scared he had once been, scared of failing, scared of being alone, scared of raising a child without a partner. But over time, he grew into the life he was handed. Sometimes not gracefully, but always with a full heart. The bus stopped 2 streets before his home. He liked getting off early so he could walk through the small market street. Vendors were closing their stalls, lights were dimming, and the cold December air carried the smell of roasted corn and dust. His boots made soft crunching sounds on the road as he walked Dot, and then he saw her Dot at first. She looked like any other person sitting on the pavement. Legs tucked in close, shoulders bent forward, a thin blanket wrapped around her like a shell. He wouldn't have noticed her if not for the small movement she made when someone passed by, a quiet lift of her hand, not desperate, not loud, just a silent request for help. He wasn't planning to look again. He had seen many people on the street before. It always hurt him, but he walked on. He had his daughter waiting for him, and a life that demanded his attention. But something pulled at him, something subtle, a feeling he could not explain. He looked again. Her hair was messy, strands sticking to her face. Her clothes were worn out, almost colorless from time. Her shoes had holes, her fingers trembled slightly from the cold. And then he saw the shape of her face familiar, in a way that made the air around him shift. He stopped walking. No, it couldn't be. He blinked hard as if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But they weren't Dot, it was her, his ex-wife. His breath caught in his throat. For a few seconds he felt nothing, just shock so heavy that even thinking felt impossible. He stared at her from across the street, frozen. The world around him moved. People walked past her, cars honked, a boy dragged a bag of vegetables behind him. But inside him, everything went still. He hadn't seen her in years. She had disappeared so quietly, so suddenly, that he had spent months searching for answers he never found. He had raised their daughter alone, carrying both roles without complaint, though his heart had been bruised for a long time. He had rebuilt everything from the ground up, their home, their routines, their trust in life. And now she was here, sitting on the cold sidewalk, shivering, looking nothing like the person he once knew. He took a step closer, almost without meaning to. The closer he got, the clearer her features appeared. Her cheeks were sunken. Her eyes carried exhaustion that went far beyond lack of sleep. She held a small cardboard sign with shaky handwriting, words he couldn't bring himself to read. He stopped a few feet away, unsure if he wanted her to notice him or not. His heart was beating too fast. Memories he had buried years ago rose like smoke. Her laughter, the arguments, the night she left, the quiet mornings when he found himself alone with the baby while trying to understand what had gone wrong. He wanted to turn away. He wanted to walk home, pretend he hadn't seen her, pretend his life hadn't just been shaken again. But he couldn't move. She shifted a little and lifted her head. And for a moment, just a second, their eyes met. Her lips parted slightly, and she looked down immediately, as if ashamed to be seen in this state, as if she wished She could disappear into the ground. He felt a strange tightness in his chest. He didn't know what emotion hit him first: anger, pity, grief, confusion. They all came together like a wave. He swallowed hard and slowly walked toward her, each step heavier than the last dot. When he stopped in front of her, she didn't raise her head. She kept staring at the ground, her fingers clutching the thin blanket that barely protected her from the cold. He didn't know what to say. Years of silence had built a wall between them, one he never expected to face again. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His voice felt stuck inside him. After a long moment, he finally spoke. "Are you ... But the rest of the sentence didn't come out. She slowly lifted her face, her eyes tired, but filled with something deeper, a mixture of shame and surprise. She looked at him as if he were a memory she never thought she'd meet again. "It's been a long time," she whispered. Her voice was faint, almost fragile. The sound of it stirred something old inside him, something he thought he had locked away forever. He nodded slightly, unable to trust his voice. Up close, she looked even worse than he thought. Her hands were thin, her lips cracked from dryness, her coat barely warm enough for the weather. She lowered her eyes again, unable to meet his gaze for long. "I didn't think you'd ever see me like this." He clenched his jaw. The truth was, he had never imagined seeing her at all. Not after the way she had walked out. Not after the silence that followed. Not after the nights he stayed awake holding a crying child, wondering how a mother could vanish so easily. Another moment passed, filled with unspoken questions and memories too heavy to touch. He finally managed to ask, "How long have you been out here?" She didn't answer right away. The hesitation itself was an answer. "A while," she murmured. He felt a sharp sting in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was anger or sorrow. Maybe both. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked. She shook her head very gently. "Not anymore." The quietness of her voice cut deeper than anything she could have shouted. He looked at her again, really looked. And he realized something that unsettled him. She didn't look like someone making excuses. She looked like someone who had lost more than she ever admitted. He cursed the sudden softness growing in him. He didn't owe her anything. He had built a good life for his daughter. He had moved on. He had accepted the past, but still she was a human being sitting on a cold street with nowhere to go. And once she had been a part of his life. He swallowed, then took a slow breath. "Come with me," he said. Her head snapped up in shock. "No, I'm fine. I don't want to trouble you." "It's cold," he replied quietly. "You can't stay out here tonight." She closed her eyes tightly, as if the offer itself hurt. "You don't have to help me. Not after everything." He hesitated before answering. "Maybe not, but I'm still doing it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them moved on, unaware of the moment unfolding. A stray dog barked in the distance. A shopkeeper pulled down his shutter. A cold breeze rushed past them. She finally nodded, her voice barely holding together. "All right, just for tonight." He helped her stand. She was lighter than he remembered, unsteady on her feet. He didn't touch her more than necessary, keeping a respectful distance. Still unsure how to feel, they walked down the street in silence. The distance between them filled with years of unanswered questions. And as they turned the corner toward his home, he realized something he wasn't prepared to admit. The life he had rebuilt so carefully was about to change again. Whether he wanted it to or not, the night seemed even colder as they walked, though neither of them spoke about it. The street was quiet, with the soft hum of faraway traffic blending into the evening air. He kept his steps slow so she wouldn't struggle to keep up, but even then, he could hear how uneven her breathing had become. She tried to hide it, maybe out of pride, maybe out of shame, he couldn't tell. But it was clear that life had not been kind to her for a long time. He didn't look directly at her. He couldn't. His mind was a storm of memories, some warm, many painful. There was a time when she had walked beside him with confidence, with dreams, with a sense of direction. But that person felt far away now, like someone from another life. The woman walking beside him tonight was tired, quiet, and fragile in a way he had never seen before. They reached the corner near his apartment complex. He slowed down, wondering how he would explain this to his daughter. She was smart, caring, and gentle-hearted. But she had her own memories, 2 memories of crying in her small bed, asking questions he couldn't answer. Questions he still didn't know how to answer. "You don't have to do this," she murmured suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, shaky. He didn't respond right away. He kept his eyes forward, focusing on the worn-out buildings ahead. "I know," he finally said, "but I'm doing it anyway." She let out a slow breath, almost like relief and disbelief tangled together. For a few moments, their footsteps were the only sound between them. "I'm not asking for anything," she whispered. "I don't want you to think I'm expecting help. I don't deserve anything from you." Her words made him flinch inside. He didn't respond, not because he agreed, but because he didn't know what to say. After everything that happened, after the years of silence, after raising a child alone, hearing her say she didn't deserve anything stirred something complicated in him. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't anger. It was something in between. He stopped walking when they reached the old building H. E and his daughter called home. The lights from the windows cast soft shadows on the pathway. He turned to her. "Just stay for the night," he said quietly. "Tomorrow, we'll figure something out." She nodded slowly, pulling the thin blanket around herself a little tighter. The cold air touched her face, making her shiver. They climbed the stairs, each step creaking softly under their feet. He walked ahead, giving her space, unsure if she felt embarrassed or simply exhausted. When they reached the door, he paused. His hand hovered over the handle for a long moment. Inside, his daughter was probably lying on the couch with her blanket, waiting for him like she always did. She had a habit of pretending to sleep until she heard the key in the door. He smiled faintly at the thought. Her small routines made his long days easier. But tonight, things would be different. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Warm air greeted them, carrying the smell of leftover rice and soup. A small lamp glowed in the corner. "You can wait here for a second," he said to her, pointing to a small space near the door. She nodded again and stayed where she was. Her eyes lowered, her posture stiff and uncertain. He walked into the living room. As expected, his daughter's small figure lay curled up on the couch, pretending to be asleep. He smiled, walked over, and touched her shoulder gently. "I'm home," he whispered. She opened her eyes immediately, a wide grin spreading across her face. She hugged him tightly, her arms wrapping around his waist. He kissed her forehead. "Did you eat?" he asked. She nodded. "I cooked, but it didn't taste good. I tried, though." He chuckled softly. "I'm sure it was perfect." Then came the moment he had been dreading. Her eyes followed the direction of the doorway, and she frowned slightly. "Is someone here?" she asked. His throat tightened. He wasn't sure how to explain it in a way that wouldn't confuse or hurt her. "There is someone," he said slowly, "and I want you to be calm when you see her." Before she could ask another question, he stepped aside and called gently, "You can come in." His ex-wife stepped into the living room. Her eyes lowered, her hands twisting the edge of her blanket nervously. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. His daughter stared quietly, confusion settling across her small face. She recognized her. Of course she did. No matter how much time had passed, Some memories never fully disappear. The woman swallowed hard. Her voice trembled. "Hi," she said softly. His daughter didn't move, didn't speak. Her eyes were searching, unsure, trying to understand why the person who had left was suddenly standing in their home. His ex-wife's voice cracked as she continued. I'm sorry to be here like this. I didn't plan it. I didn't want you to see me this way." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She seemed terrified of making the child uncomfortable. His daughter finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you staying here?" He stepped closer to her, placing a hand gently on her back. "Just for one night," he said softly. She didn't have anywhere to go. The little girl looked at her father, then back at the woman standing in front of her. She didn't speak again, but she nodded slowly, as if trying to accept something she couldn't fully understand. His ex-wife's eyes filled again, and she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. She looked fragile, like one wrong word could break her completely. "Thank you," she whispered, though it was unclear who she was thanking, him or the child. He guided his daughter toward her room. "Go get your blanket," he said gently. "I'll tuck you in." She nodded again and went to her room, leaving the two adults alone for a moment. The silence felt heavy, thick with everything they weren't ready to say. "I'll sleep on the floor," she said quietly. "I don't want to trouble you." "You can take the couch," he replied. "The floor's too cold." She hesitated, then nodded. He handed her a clean blanket from the cupboard. She held it carefully, almost like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. He watched her for a moment, noticing the way she looked around the home, the small table with crayons, the stack of folded clothes, the soft toys arranged neatly on the shelf. There was a quiet sadness in her eyes, a sense of loss, maybe regret. "You've made a good life for her," she said softly. He didn't respond. Compliments from her felt strange, almost uncomfortable. He went to check on his daughter and found her sitting quietly on the bed. She wasn't crying, but her eyes were heavy with questions. He sat beside her. "Are you okay?" She nodded, though it wasn't a confident one. "Why is she here?" she asked. He took a slow breath. "Because sometimes people make mistakes, big ones. And sometimes life becomes hard in ways we don't see." "Will she leave again?" the girl asked. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But tonight she needed help. And we help people when we can." The little girl leaned against him. He wrapped an arm around her, kissing the top of her head. After tucking her in, he returned to the living room. His ex-wife sat on the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes staring at the floor. "Thank you again," she said quietly. He didn't answer immediately. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, trying to understand the person in front of him. "I'm not doing this to fix the past," he said finally. "This is just for tonight." She nodded, her expression filled with acceptance. "I know. I'm grateful anyway." The room fell silent again. Not hostile, not warm, just silent. He turned off the lights except for the small lamp. She lay down carefully on the couch, pulling the blanket over herself. He could see how tired she was, how quickly her eyes closed as he walked toward his daughter's room. He took one last look at the woman he once knew, and the woman she had become. Life had taken them in different directions, but fate had brought her back into his home tonight. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning of something he never expected to face again. The next morning arrived slowly. The kind of morning where the sun took its time rising, spreading soft light across the small apartment. He woke before the alarm, his eyes opening to the quietness around him. For a moment, he forgot everything that had happened the night before. But as soon as he stepped into the hallway, and saw the folded blanket on the couch. Reality returned. She was still here. He found her sitting at the edge of the couch, awake, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of water. She had probably been up for a while. Her hair was tied back loosely, though she looked drained, like the night hadn't given her rest. She stood up the moment she saw him, almost startled. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning," he replied, his voice calm but guarded. He didn't know what to expect. A conversation, an explanation, an apology. But she didn't say anything more. She simply stood there with her shoulders slightly hunched, like someone who didn't know where they belonged. He moved to the kitchen and started preparing breakfast. It was a simple routine: crack the eggs, heat the pan, toast the bread. He found comfort in routines. They kept him steady. She stood a few feet away, unsure whether to sit or help. At one point, she took a small step forward. "Do you want me to do something?" she asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. He shook his head. "No, it's fine." She nodded and stepped back, gripping the edge of her sleeves. There was a silence between them, not sharp or angry, but full of things they weren't ready to say. He finished cooking and placed the plates on the table. Right then, his daughter walked out of her room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. The sight of her made everything inside him soften. "Morning," he said, smiling. She walked to him and hugged his arm. "Morning, Dad." Then she saw the woman standing quietly near the couch. Her small steps slowed. Her expression became careful again. "Good morning," his ex-wife said gently. The girl didn't respond right away. After a moment, she gave a small nod. "Morning." He pulled out a chair for his daughter, and she sat down. His ex-wife hesitated again, but eventually sat at the far end of the table. Breakfast was quiet. The clinking of spoons and plates filled the room. He could feel the tension, not angry tension, but the kind that comes from uncertainty. Halfway through the meal, his daughter finally spoke. "Are you leaving today?" She asked that the woman's hands froze around her cup. He looked at his daughter gently. "We'll talk about that later." His daughter nodded, but she kept her eyes on her plate. After breakfast, he helped his daughter get ready for school. She put on her small backpack and tied her shoelaces slowly, glancing occasionally at the woman in the living room. "You'll pick me up today?" she asked. "Of course," he replied. She nodded and leaned close to whisper, "Will she still be here?" He didn't know what to say. "Maybe. We'll figure it out." She accepted the answer for now. He walked her outside, holding her hand the way he always did. His daughter paused before entering the school gate. "Dad?" "Yeah? Are you okay?" Her question surprised him. He blinked slowly, feeling something shift inside his chest. "I'm okay," he said softly. "Promise." She nodded and ran inside. When he returned home, he found his ex-wife sitting on the couch, her hands folded quietly in her lap. She looked up at him with eyes that held fear, shame, and a kind of pain he didn't recognize from before. "I should go," she said. "Go where?" She lowered her eyes. "Anywhere. I'll manage." He sighed. "You're not managing. I saw that last night." She didn't argue. She couldn't. He sat across from her, leaving space between them. "What happened to you?" he finally asked. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with a heaviness he couldn't hide. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her fingers twisted together, her breathing uneven. "Life." She whispered the word as if it weighed too much. "I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. I thought I was going toward something better, but I kept falling instead. And then one day, I didn't have anything left." He watched her carefully, unsure whether to believe everything she said. But the exhaustion in her eyes looked real. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked. Her face tightened. She pressed her lips together as if trying not to break. Because I was ashamed, her voice cracked. I left thinking I could build a life I was proud of. But every time I thought about coming back, I couldn't face you. Or her. I thought, if you saw what I had become, it would hurt you more than my leaving. His jaw clenched. You left a baby. Her eyes filled instantly, tears forming at the edge. I know. Her voice broke. And that's the mistake I'll regret for the rest of my life. The room fell silent again. Not a comfortable silence. A heavy one. He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. I'm not saying this to hurt you, he said slowly. But you need to understand something. You disappearing, it wasn't easy for us. She cried for you for months, years even. And I'd have given anything to explain why you weren't there. But I didn't have answers. She covered her mouth, holding back a sob. Her shoulders trembled. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I know sorry isn't enough. He didn't respond. He didn't know how to. After a few moments, she wiped her eyes and looked at him again. I never stopped thinking about her, she said. Not for a single day. But every day I told myself the same thing, that she deserved better than a mother who couldn't even take care of herself. He stared at her for a long time. Part of him wanted to believe it. Part of him wasn't ready. What do you want now? He asked. She hesitated. I don't want anything from you, she said quietly. I know I'm not welcome in your life. I know I've lost the right. I just needed one night to feel human again. He felt something twist inside him. Not forgiveness. Not anger. Something else. Something almost like grief. I'm not throwing you out, he said, but you can't stay here forever. We need to figure out what's next. She nodded, understanding completely. I'll leave later today, she said. I just need a little time. He didn't argue. Hours passed in quietness. She washed the dishes without being asked. She folded the blankets she used. She helped tidy the living room. Every small action felt like her way of saying she didn't want to be a burden. In the afternoon, he left to pick up their daughter from school. When they returned, the woman was sitting with her backpack packed, ready to go. His daughter froze when she saw her. Are you leaving? The girl asked. The woman nodded gently. Yes, I don't want to stay where I'm not meant to be. The little girl looked at her father, eyes full of confusion and fear. Dad? He crouched beside her. She needs time to fix her life, he explained softly. But she's safe. And that's what matters right now. The child's eyes filled with unshed tears. She didn't cry, but her face crumpled slightly. The woman walked closer, kneeling in front of her. I know I hurt you, she whispered. I know I left you when you needed me. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I love you, more than I ever showed. The little girl looked down. Why did you leave me? She asked, her voice tiny. The woman broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Because I was weak, she said. Because I was scared. Because I didn't understand what real love looked like until it was gone. The girl didn't move. She stood still, trying to process words that were much too heavy for a child. The woman reached out slowly, but stopped halfway, unsure if she was allowed to touch her. Can I hug you? She whispered. The child hesitated. Then, after a long moment, she nodded. The woman pulled her close, holding her with trembling arms. It wasn't the hug of a mother who had been present. It was the hug of someone who had lost everything and was grateful for even a second of warmth. When they pulled apart, the woman wiped her eyes and stood up. She turned to him. Thank you, she said, for taking care of her, for being everything she needed. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. She walked toward the door, her steps slow, her shoulders heavy. Where will you go? He asked. She forced a small smile. Somewhere that's not here. Somewhere I can start again. He nodded. She opened the door and stepped outside. The cold air touched her face. She took one last look at them, the life she had lost, the life she had abandoned. Then she left Dot as the door closed softly behind her. He felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. His daughter reached for his hand. He picked her up gently. "Will she come back?" She asked. He didn't know. "Maybe," he whispered. "But next time, we'll be ready." He held his daughter close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. The day felt heavy, but something told him this wasn't the end. Dot. This was just the middle of a story he never expected to relive. The next few days felt heavier than usual. For him, like he was carrying a weight he didn't know how to put down. Even when he went to work, followed his routine, made breakfast for his daughter, and drove her to school, his mind kept drifting back to the woman he once shared a home with. It was strange how someone who had been gone for years could suddenly fill his thoughts again, not because he wanted her back, but because seeing her in such a broken state stirred something he didn't expect. He tried to keep everything normal at home. He helped his daughter with homework, listened to her stories from school, and joked with her while making dinner. But she could sense something was off. Children have a soft way of noticing the smallest changes, even when adults try to hide them. One evening, while he was washing dishes, his daughter stood quietly near the kitchen doorway. She watched him for a moment before asking in a small voice if something was wrong. He looked at her and forced a smile, saying everything was fine, but she didn't believe him. She walked closer and hugged him from behind, resting her head against his back in the same way she used to when she was younger. That simple hug almost broke him. He put the plate down and turned around to hold her. He didn't cry, but his eyes burned with a feeling he couldn't name. Maybe it was guilt, maybe confusion, or maybe the fear that one day she might grow up and face a moment as painful as the one he had faced years ago. He wanted to keep his daughter safe from everything, even from the truth, but he knew he couldn't hide things forever. She was growing up, and she had the right to know, especially when the truth involved someone who was missing from her life. Later that night, after she fell asleep, he sat alone in the living room with the lights off. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. He stared at the floor, thinking about the woman on the sidewalk holding a cardboard sign. He had told himself he was done with that part of his life. He had built a new world for himself and his daughter, brick by brick, year by year. But now life was pulling him back into old shadows. The next morning, he woke up feeling restless. After dropping his daughter at school, he found himself driving toward the same street where he had seen his ex-wife. He didn't fully understand why he was doing it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was compassion. Or maybe he just wanted answers he never got when she left. She was there again, sitting on the same spot, wrapped in the same old coat. Her hands were cold, and her eyes looked tired. She saw him approach, and she slowly lowered her head as if bracing herself. He walked up to her and handed her a warm cup of tea he picked up on the way. She took it with shaky hands and whispered a thank you. They didn't talk for long that day. It was mostly quiet, just the sound of cars passing and the wind brushing against their clothes. She didn't ask him for money, and he didn't bring up the past. But something shifted between them. The heavy wall that had stood for years started to crack just a little. The next day, he brought her a small bag of food. The day after that, a warm blanket. And soon, checking on her became part of his routine, something he did not out of obligation, but out of a quiet sense of humanity. Still, he kept all of this hidden from his daughter, unsure of how she would react or whether he was making the right choice. Days turned into a week, and each time he went to see her, she opened up more. She told him how things had gone wrong in her life, how bad decisions piled on top of each other, and how she had spent years being too ashamed to reach out. She didn't try to justify anything, She just spoke with a tired honesty he wasn't expecting. One afternoon, she mentioned their daughter. Her voice broke when she said she wondered if the child even remembered her. He didn't know what to say. Their daughter did remember. She just didn't talk about it much. The memories were blurry, faint, like old photos left in the sun too long. He began thinking about how unfair it was for a child to grow up with unanswered questions. Even if the mother had made mistakes, the daughter still deserved the truth. He went home that evening with a heavy heart, unsure of what to do. When his daughter returned from school, she noticed he was unusually quiet. They ate dinner together, and she kept glancing at him, tapping her fingers on the table like she wanted to ask something, but wasn't sure how. Finally, after dinner, she sat beside him on the couch and asked again if something was wrong. This time he didn't avoid the question. He knew she deserved honesty, even if the truth might hurt. He took a deep breath and told her he had seen H. A mother. He explained where, how she looked, and why he had been acting differently. His daughter listened without interrupting, her eyes wide and thoughtful. She didn't cry, and she didn't get angry. Instead, she asked if her mother was okay. He told her the truth, she wasn't okay, but she was trying. His daughter looked down at her hands for a long moment. Then she asked if she could see her mother too. The question hit him hard. He wasn't expecting it, and for a moment he didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to protect her, to shield her from disappointment or emotional pain. But another part of him knew she needed this more than he realized. Children don't hold on to bitterness the way adults do. They look for answers, not blame. He asked her if she was sure, and she nodded softly. She wasn't nervous or scared. She seemed calm, as if she had been hoping for this chance without knowing it. That night, he lay awake again, thinking about what the next day would bring. He felt a mix of fear and hope, not for himself, but for his daughter. He worried the meeting might confuse her or reopen old wounds. But he also sensed that it could help her heal in ways nothing else could. The next afternoon, after picking her up from school, he parked the car near the street where his ex-wife waited every day. His daughter held his hand tightly, but didn't say a word. They walked together, step by step, toward the woman sitting on the cold pavement. The moment she saw them, she froze. Her eyes widened, and the cup she was holding almost slipped from her hand. She didn't speak at first. She just stared at the girl she hadn't seen in years, her face trembling with a mix of joy, shame, and heartbreak. His daughter let go of his hand and took a few steps forward. The woman covered her mouth with her hand as tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. She whispered the child's name, her voice breaking into pieces. The daughter didn't run to her, but she didn't step back either. She stood there, waiting, giving her mother space to gather herself. It was a quiet moment, but it carried more weight than any words could. And as he watched them, he felt something inside him shift, something he had been carrying for years. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew this moment was the beginning of something he couldn't avoid anymore. The moment held the kind of silence that makes a person forget the world is still moving. Cars passed behind them. People walked by. Conversations floated around, but none of it touched the three of them standing in that small corner of the street. It was as if time had paused just for them, giving space to a moment that had been waiting for years. His ex-wife slowly stood up. Her eyes locked on the daughter she had not seen since she left. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the fear that the child might turn away. She wiped her cheeks, though the tears kept coming, and took a hesitant step forward. His daughter looked at him for a second, as if asking for silent permission, and moved toward her mother. She didn't run or cry. She simply took her place in front of her, small and steady. Her mother bent slightly and whispered an apology so soft that even the wind almost carried it away at first. The girl didn't say anything. She was studying her mother's face, noticing the tired lines, the hollow cheeks, the eyes that carried years of struggle. Then, with a small voice, she said she wasn't angry, just confused. That single sentence made the woman break down completely. She knelt on the pavement and covered her face as she cried, the kind of cry that comes from a place deeper than shame. He stood a few steps back, watching everything. His heart tightened in a way he didn't expect. It wasn't anger he felt, it was something heavier. Something like helplessness. All the years he had spent rebuilding himself. All the nights he had comforted his daughter when she asked why her mother didn't stay. All the moments of frustration and loneliness. Everything pressed against his chest at once. And yet, seeing them together, even in this broken state, made him feel a strange kind of release that his daughter gently reached out and touched her mother's shoulder. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Children express forgiveness differently. Sometimes it's in a smile. Sometimes in a touch. Sometimes just in standing close instead of stepping away. When the woman finally stood again, she looked at him with eyes full of apology. She didn't ask him for anything. She didn't try to explain herself again. She just whispered that she was grateful he brought their daughter to her. He nodded slowly, unsure what to say. They didn't stay much longer that day. He didn't want his daughter exposed to the cold for too long. So he guided her back to the car, and she looked back several times as her mother watched them leave, holding the warm tea he had brought her earlier. That night at home, his daughter was quiet. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, thinking about everything that had happened. He sat beside her, waiting for her to speak first. After a few minutes, she laid her head on his shoulder and whispered that seeing her mother like that made her feel sad. He wrapped an arm around her and told her it was okay to feel that way. It was okay to be unsure. She then asked if they could help her mother. The question hit him harder than anything. He had been helping her secretly food, blankets, warm drinks, but bringing her into their lives was a different matter. He knew the world wasn't simple, and people didn't change overnight. But he also knew his daughter had a kind heart, and he didn't want to discourage that, he thought, for a while before answering. He told her they would try to help, but carefully, step by step. They couldn't fix everything at once, but they could help her get to a place where she could stand on her own again. His daughter nodded, relieved. The next morning, he went back to the same street, this time without hiding anything. He told his ex-wife that their daughter wanted to help her. She covered her mouth, shocked by the kindness she didn't think she deserved. He told her they couldn't give her money directly, but he could look for a support program that could help her get back on her feet. At first, she resisted. She felt too ashamed, too undeserving. But he insisted gently, telling her that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was the first step to rebuilding. After a long pause, she agreed. He made calls, visited places, filled out forms, and stood in lines. It took days of effort, but eventually he found a local center that took in women struggling with homelessness, offering counseling, temporary shelter, medical support, and help in finding work. When he brought her there, she hesitated at the door, looking back at him with uncertainty. But with a small nod from him, she walked inside. The weeks that followed were quieter but meaningful. His daughter wrote short letters to her mother, telling her about school, about the cat they fed in the backyard, about the book she was reading. They weren't long letters, but they were full of innocence and hope. He delivered them each time he visited. His ex-wife slowly began to look healthier. Her face softened, her shoulders straightened a bit, and for the first time in years, she looked like she had a future instead of a shadow. She thanked him every time, but he always told her the real reason he was doing this. Their daughter deserved answers, not silence. One afternoon, the center allowed his ex-wife to have a supervised meeting with her daughter in a warm indoor space. The room was simple chairs, a table, soft light, but it felt like a safe place for a new beginning. His daughter walked in holding a small drawing she had made. It was a simple picture of 3 people standing under the sun, a child in the middle, holding hands with 2 adults on either side. When the mother saw it, she covered her mouth again, her eyes filling with tears. His daughter handed it to her and said she hoped one day they could all talk together without sadness. Hearing that nearly broke him. He had been holding himself together for so long that he didn't even realize how tired his heart was until that moment. He stepped out of the room and let them talk, giving them space. He stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, breathing deeply. For years he had carried anger, disappointment, fear, but now, watching his daughter choose kindness over resentment, he felt something inside him loosen. He didn't know what the future held. Maybe his ex-wife would fully recover. Maybe she would stumble again. Maybe she would become a consistent presence in their daughter's life. Or maybe things would stay fragile. But he had learned something important. Sometimes choosing compassion is harder than choosing anger. And sometimes it hurts more, but it also heals more. When the meeting was over, his daughter came out smiling softly. She hugged him tightly, and he realized she was healing in ways he hadn't expected. As they left the center, he glanced back and saw his ex-wife standing in the doorway. She looked fragile, grateful, and determined. She didn't call out to him, and he didn't wave. But they shared a silent understanding. He had done his part, not because he still loved her, not because he wanted to rewrite the past, but because he wanted his daughter to grow up without carrying the heaviness he had carried for so long. And as he drove home, the late afternoon sun shining softly through the windshield, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, a quiet sense of peace. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't tidy, and it wasn't simple. But it was real. Sometimes life doesn't give clean endings, it gives honest ones. And that was enough.